An Indian environment is an extended work environment. You must have the ability to do the job, and you must have the dependability or trustworthiness where your employer, your manager, your colleagues can rely on you.
So today we are joined in conversation with Mr. Amarinder Singh, who is the founder and CEO of Clove Dental, India's largest dental chair chain. He's a seasoned executive and entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience, both in entrepreneurial ventures and large corporate organizations. Prior to founding Global Dental and Clove Dental in India, Mr. Singh ran a supply chain software company based in San Francisco, California. He was a senior VP at SAP, with global responsibility for SAP's supply chain, manufacturing, and product lifecycle products, collectively generating over $1 billion in revenue. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Raman.
Thank you for having me.
Great. And just to start with the conversation, so as an entrepreneur, you incubated and managed a number of companies in the healthcare and education sector. So what would you say were the key skills that helped you through this entrepreneurial journey of yours? For instance, even though you're not a dentist, yet successfully founded and are running one of the largest dental clinics chains in the country. So how did that come to happen?
Right. So I would say that I would point to three things that that are critical in any entrepreneurial journey or any, career journey for that matter. And at least from my vantage point, the number one is having a very clear learning mindset. Learning mindset, which is a well-defined field, but in simple terms, learning mindset means that you are ready to learn new things. You are ready to accept your mistakes. You're ready to, what I find oftentimes is many young professionals are a little too scared to accept mistakes, thinking that, accepting mistake would result in some kind of, negative feedback or some kind of a reprimand or some kind of a punishment. So therefore they tend to deflect those mistakes to someone else. And what that happens is, by deflecting those mistakes to someone else, you are actually not realizing what mistakes you're making, and therefore you're not learning from them. So having a learning mindset, I think, is a very critical component of being successful in any career, whether it's entrepreneurial or, even in life, even in personal relationships. I think that's a very powerful mindset that one must develop. The second thing that has worked with me, and perhaps because of my supply chain background, is really having a very clear process thinking, particularly when you're looking at business, when you're looking at any entrepreneurial or business venture. All businesses follow and have certain processes, right? So having a very deep process thinking, meaning you begin a process from its initiation stage all the way through the steps till the time the process is completed. If you think through them in a process way, any business, any venture, any industry is possible for anyone. Let me give a simple example. If you were to, you're saying, okay, how will I capture if I'm selling, let's say, jeans in a market, and how will I capture my customers? So if you start thinking, okay, who are the people who wear jeans? What age group? Where do they go? Where do they hang out? If you start asking questions in that logical process manner, okay, if they hang out in bars, they hang out in cafe coffee days of the world, so maybe I'll go and meet them there and have some of my, people wearing my jeans sit in those coffee shops so that people can see them if I'm offering something unique. So you start thinking in a process, and okay, how will they buy it? When will they buy it? Do they buy it during the day? Do they buy it during summer holidays? When do they buy it? You start to think about these things. You can then start to answer those questions. So asking those questions around a process. So that would be my second aspect of it. And the third, perhaps the most important one, is balancing your ego with humility. So what I mean by that is, if you want to be successful, by definition, you have to have some ego, because the ego is the one that drives you to, perform, drives you to do different things, drives you to be successful. Oftentimes, many people who don't keep that in check, they let that ego turn into a negative attribute from a positive attribute, then they start to see success not coming their way. Whereas if you have a balance between, you have the ego to drive and be successful, but at the same time have the humility to know where you are not capable of doing certain things. So in my case, I knew very well that dentistry was something I'd never done before. I'd been to a dentist, that's about the extent of my experience of dentistry was. But by having a learning mindset, be able to ask questions and learn from my mistakes, by having a process thinking to take every process and dissect it into detailed processes, into detailed steps, and then to have to balance my humility with balance my ego with humility. I think those three attributes are perhaps the key ingredients for anyone to do any venture.
And now moving ahead, so having worked with corporates and ventures both in India and abroad, so what sets the work culture apart, and how do you feel both of them can benefit from a cross-cultural value system exchange, if you may?
So, having worked in the US and Canada for majority of my prior life before coming back to India, I was out of India for 30 years. So I left when I was, a young kid in middle school, and then came back about 8-9 years ago. And I think there are clearly differences between cultures, and one has to first understand what those differences are. Both cultures have pros and cons, like anything else, right? So there's no one culture that's better than the other. Now, when the key difference for me, which I've really realized here coming back after having worked there for so many years, is that Indian environment is an extended work environment. What I mean by that is that every employee, every person working is not only satisfying the job that he or she is doing, not only satisfying the work, but it's also satisfying within his household the expectations of his family members, or her family members. So, my father wants to see my progress. So, because he wants to talk about with pride to his friends about his, family's success and progress. So it's a very extended environment. So just being good at your job and just delivering your work is required, is a prerequisite to be successful, no question, but is not sufficient. It is not sufficient for you to be happy at home. So you have to be able to go out and you have to be able to convince your family members through various means, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but you have to convince your family members that you are successful, not in an arrogant way, not in an egoistic way, but in a way that gives them confidence and peace. That yes, my son, my daughter, my brother, my sister, my husband, my wife, they are happy, they are performing, they're succeeding, because that gives them that sense of pride, which then fuels the positive energy for you to be successful. So it's sort of it's a circle. If you don't follow that circle, now, whereas in the West, it tends not to be as extended. In the West, it tends to be very much more individualistic. You tell me what I'm doing, give me my, job, give me my feedback, give me some more money, and I'm done. I don't care about my title. I don't care about my role. I don't care about my, my position as much. Whereas in cultures which are extended. So one of the practical thing what we changed was when I came in, I wanted to have a very flat organization. I wanted to have an organization that was, that people were allowed to think freely, and, we could work in a very flat structure. When I realized that a flat structure means that you work without any title per se, but you work based on your results. Now that culture works very well when you don't have an extended family to care for. When you have an extended family to care for, an example of that is, you would come in, and let's say you come work for us in the previous culture, previous format, would be that you wouldn't have a title. You'd be, you're a reporter. All right, you can be a reporter and you can be a journalist, and you won't have a particular, you're not an editor, you're not a junior reporter, senior reporter, any of that. And therefore, you never have a, positional growth. Your growth comes from your work and your income, but not from your title. But therefore, when you go back home and your dad says, listen, you joined as a reporter and 5 years in, you're still a reporter. I mean, what's going on? Are you not, doing well? Are you not performing? You say, no, dad, but I'm making a lot more money. I'm writing bigger articles, but no, that's not good enough. So it is an important aspect to understand the nuances of culture.
Talking about your personal career, or I would say entrepreneurial journey. So having exposure in supply chain to technology to education and then healthcare. So how would you say that the transition has been, and are there any learning from this multi-domain oriented approach that you followed in your career as opposed to a linear path that most of us tend to follow? Like you just mentioned, that just a simple one format driven job role.
Yeah, I think, Deepak, it depends on how you define a linear versus multidimensional role, right? If you define a linear role as in I stick to one industry, well, that's a linear. Or I stick to one country, that could be linear. Or I stick to one profession. Well, I'm a sales guy and I stick to sales. I'm in customer service, I stick to customer service. So I think, first of all, defining what is a linear path, it is actually depends on the individual's interests per se. So, so I don't believe that I have done anything that is multidimensional. I think, in my way, I've been very linear in my way of doing things, right? My linear way is I'll go look at a particular problem and I'll say, well, this is a problem I want to solve this problem in a more efficient and an ethical and a high quality way. And whether that problem happens to be in technology, whether that problem happens to be in supply chain, or that problem happens to be in healthcare, so be it. I ask the same questions, who's the customer, who are you going to provide this service, what is your product, what is your service, how are you going to deliver it, how are you going to price it, how the customer is going to take it, what will be the customer issues, how will you resolve the complaints. These are all questions that are relevant in every industry, right? So just like a sales guy would say, listen, I can sell anything. I can sell, I can sell Levi's jeans, or I can sell, a toothpaste, and I can sell Coca-Cola. I don't care. I'm a sales guy. I know people want to buy something and I want to sell. So he has defined his linearity as sales. And somebody has defined, well, I work in automotive industry, and therefore I have never left automotive industry. So I want to work in automotive. I'm an automotive guy. Well, he has defined himself to be a linear in automotive. So I would say that it is a question that an individual must ask themselves, and not get narrowed in to definitions that they hear from someone else. Just because someone says that, oh, you're an automotive guy, hence you should remain in automotive. Well, what does that mean? I think it depends on what you like to do, what your interests are, what really excites you, what you get passionate about, because whatever you get passionate about, you define your linear path, and that then becomes your definition of linearity. So I would say, therefore, for me, it has, I don't even know what you're saying. I don't even know what you're asking. For me, it was, no different. And tomorrow I could leave healthcare and I can go into dance industry and maybe, open some dance studios for all I don't know. I don't know. So my point is, it is not about a particular, it is really how you define the question. And I can give you examples, as I just did, of people defining their linearity differently. And that's what you need to do.
Exactly. And so just in a scenario where you're probably looking to hire a professional for, say, Clove Dental, so what would matter more to you? Would it be like an educational qualification or the pedigree, or would it be just the competence, like the way you just mentioned, that the way a person defines his or her expertise in a specific domain?
Yeah, I would say that, there are two most important attributes that one what I look for any professional, whether it's a Clove or any of my previous companies, and perhaps something that I would probably, something that has worked for me well, and until something new comes along will probably be my mantra, if you will. And that is to look for two things in an individual. One is, can she do the job? Can he do the job? Right. So that's a profile. So if I'm gonna hire you as a dentist and you're not even qualified to be a dentist, well, then obviously I'm not gonna hire you, right? Because you can't do the job, right? So the first question obviously is, can you do the job? You must have the skill set, the ability, the learning. You may not have the experience. Depending on if that role requires experience, then you would need experience. But if it's a role that doesn't require experience, requires raw skills, then you must have whatever the definition of the role is, you must be able to deliver on that role, is the first question, right? The second part is your cultural fit or your dependability, your trustworthiness. Can I rely on you? Will I be able to rely on you when the going gets tough? What will you do? Will you run away? Will you, when it is difficult, when you're challenged with a difficult task, how will you handle that particular difficult challenge? Because oftentimes just knowing what to do, but then not able to handle difficult situation, not be able to be reliable, dependable, trustworthy, not have the cultural fit, it becomes a serious, negative in your. So I would say those two things are very important in any job. It doesn't matter what the job description is. You must have the ability to do the job, and you must have the dependability or trustworthiness where your employer, your manager, your colleagues can rely on you. Say, you know what, when I need Deepak, he comes around, and I know he will help me out when I need it to the best of his or her ability. It's not that you can do God, but it's going to be what you can. And those two things combined are the key skills. And I would even argue that I would take someone who I think is more dependable, less on the performance scale, because ability to learn and grow on your your technical, your knowledge skills is much easier, but ability to actually build those core skills of dependability and trustworthiness, those take much longer, and they are ingrained from how you're brought up. So I would take a relatively lower ranked guy, medium level performer with a higher level dependability versus the other way around. So therefore I would say dependability and trustworthy, it has a slight edge over your raw skills. So if a young professional is looking for employment anywhere, or even trying to do entrepreneurial thing, they need to be able to be honest to themselves and say, can I do this job? And what is my mindset? What is my demeanor? What is my attitude when the things get difficult? Can I be trusted upon? Can I be reliable on? Will I run away, or will I actually do the work?
Perfect. And considering the current times that we are in, the COVID-19 pandemic, so it has already disrupted a lot of segments or industries as it is. So how do you think it has affected the healthcare space, and more importantly, the professionals that are in it?
Yeah, I think, as you can imagine, in any kind of crisis, right? Particularly a crisis that comes to you as a shock, meaning suddenly, right? It's not something that you anticipate. It is coming to you as a shock. What happens typically is the first reaction is to get, to stop, to get stalled immediately, and to be shocked by it. And your senses, your entire, human brain goes into a shock mode, and then you react in a your animalistic way, in your instinct, and you retreat, or you run, or you deflect. So that's typically what happened, in healthcare, in any industry, and even the governments. We said, let's stop, lockdown, let's just shut everything down because we are in shock mode, right? So that's your first reaction, that you react to a certain calamity that came to you suddenly. You react in shock. After that, the ones who are more resilient will now start to get out of the shock and now start to learn. They go in an education mode. They start to learn and say, okay, what exactly happened? Why did it happen? How do I survive? How do I live? How do I modify? How do I perform in this new environment? And once you figure it out, then they move to the thriving stage, right? They can come out of it. So this is exactly what has happened with healthcare. When the crisis hit, initial reaction was shock, and in dental, and governments, we all shut down our businesses. But at Clove, what we did was we spent, that shock lasted maybe a few days, maybe a week. We don't know what was going on. But after that, we began and said, all right, what exactly happened? What is this virus? How do we work? how do we make sure that we can provide safety? Because safety always has been our priority at Clove, always has, but now it has become an obsession of ours. But we said, all right, how do we make sure that we are going to ensure safety of our staff? Because we can ensure safety of our staff, we cannot ensure safety of our patients. So, most people would say, hey, in this crisis, shouldn't you be worried about the safety of your patient? Yes, absolutely. But first we have to worry about the safety of our staff, because once our staff is safe, we can ensure our patients are safe. So we spend a fair bit of time figuring out how do we make our staff safe. And the way you make them safe is you provide knowledge, you give them training, you give them, because once the human brain understands, and they're all very, very, very smart people. So it was not very difficult for us, because these are, top tier of the country. They're intelligent doctors. It doesn't, it's not easy to be a dentist. And at Clove, we bring in the best of the best. So now you're talking about the creme de la creme of the country. So you have really smart people. And but they are seeking information, they're seeking knowledge. So you provide them that knowledge. We did research, we engaged with Indian Dental Council, Dental Council of India, American Dental Council, Australian, Canadian. We did a research globally to figure out exactly what it takes to provide a safe environment for our staff. We deployed new equipment. We bought in, these devices called aerosol suction devices and decontamination units, ASDU, aerosol suction decontamination unit. What it does is that as a patient is sitting in our clinic, and the only mouth that is open in our clinic is the patient's mouth. Everybody else is covered and masked, so we are safe. The patient's mouth, then the aerosols that come out of the patient's mouth are sucked into this unit and decontaminated. So we were able to bring in methods that ensured that our staff and our patients were safe. Now, when that happens, our doctors and the knowledge, they are very comfortable, very confident, and they are healthcare workers anyway. So they've come back with, strong resilience, with pride that yes, COVID, no problems, Mr. COVID, bring it on, we can handle it. So I think that's the way to handle any crisis. You recognize the shock, you appreciate that the shock will happen, then you go into learning mode, into a knowledge mode, understanding exactly what happened, why it happened, because this was out of nowhere, right? COVID was not something in January. We probably didn't know about what COVID was. Most people didn't, right? So, and then once you have been able to tackle the solutions today, we are very proud that, nearly 230 of our 350 clinics are open. All our, treatments are available. We have patients coming in, are getting treated, and knock on wood, we have no instances that we are aware of that has happened where any infection has crossed, because we have taken all. In fact, I argue, and I often say this to my team, that Clove Dental clinics are safer than the apartment buildings or any regular building that you walk into or a grocery store you walk into, because the amount of decontamination and fumigation that we are doing because of a healthcare worker, it is far greater than what an average in a business or industry would do. So that's where we are. And I think that's how we have recovered and rebounded. And I think, Clove Dental and healthcare workers are doing an amazing work. I'll bring you back to my first point, the having a learning mindset, which is what we have in the organization, having a process thinking to making sure that we are able to think through exactly what we need to do, what equipment, what safety, what protocols, what PPE, how do we screen patients, how do we decontaminate, just having a process thinking. And then again, having the ability to have humility, at the same time have the ego. We say, yes, we are the largest dental chain in the country, but that doesn't mean anything. We are the largest, but we must become the safest and most reliable dental chain in the country, and we have become. And I think that's how these things. So my first comments that I made are very relevant to exactly how we handled it.
Yeah, exactly, and I couldn't agree more. You've been actually that agile of an organization who's been able to heads-on take the whole pandemic and ensure the safety of your employees first, and then in turn also ensure safety for the patients and the people coming to the clinics. So coming to the end of the conversation, so which is one of the upcoming sectors, according to you, or domains in particular, that you feel will become dominant in the industry, so to say? Or what would be the skills that...
Are you talking about healthcare industry, or are you talking healthcare?
it could be healthcare, but otherwise also if you see any other domains coming up in terms of where people would require skill sets that are not readily available right now with the youth as such. So what would both those be as per you? Like,
Right. I'll talk. Right. Uh, I will talk about obviously healthcare, and then probably another example of another industry. But clearly in healthcare, the at-home services, or traditionally the model is been that a lot of your healthcare, you went to a healthcare facility.
yeah.
You had a healthcare need, and you either went to a doctor's office, diagnostic lab, you went to a healthcare facility. And now that's not going to go away, because many times you need a lot of equipment infrastructure to care for certain problems. So hospitals, dental clinics, these kinds of systems that require a whole lot of equipment that cannot be brought in, to your home remotely, or cannot be. So therefore, that will continue. However, there were many reasons for you to, go to a healthcare facility, which really were not required for you to be physically there. You were not getting any probes or any machines. You were just having a conversation with a physician or a doctor, or, and having, so therefore a lot of those services before, they were reluctant. They, meaning the healthcare community, was reluctant in breaking the mold, because why, it's only small services, 95% of my revenue comes from other things, why do I worry about it? But now there will be a huge growth in at-home services. Now I will again remind you, it will not be able to replace your physical, because in healthcare you need a lot of equipment. Maybe in a few decades, of when the equipment becomes much more smaller, and they become technology goes even more to a nano level, then things might get more at home. But for the next near future, you will have a growth in at-home services with a continuous improvement at site or at location services in healthcare as well. Now for dentistry, clearly a dental treatment is something that we need to work in your mouth. So we cannot, it's very, very difficult for us to fix problems in your mouth without having all the equipment. Now we can bring some of that equipment to your house, but it is often not safe for us to bring a lot of equipment, because it's a medical surgical environment, so it's difficult. So you will continue to have dental clinics, you'll continue to go to dental clinics. But what we have done is we've launched e-dentist, tele-dentistry or video chat format for our patients. Now why have we done that? Because oftentimes when you go to a dentist, if you were getting say an extraction of your tooth because the tooth was hurting and you needed to get an extraction, and you happened to be taking blood thinners because you were a heart patient or some other reason. When you go to a clinic, the doctor would tell you, dentist would tell you, oh, I'm sorry, you're a heart patient. Why don't you stop taking your blood thinners for 3 days and then come back to me? Yeah. And the patient would say, well, doctor, you could have told me that on the phone. I could have, stopped doing that 3 days ago and not sit in the car and drive up here and then waste your time, waste my time, add all this cost to the system, only to be told that come back 3 days from now. So what we're doing now is we're saying, listen, let's have before you go to a hospital facility, prepare yourself a little better. Let the facility know what you're looking for. Let us tell you what you can do in anticipation to coming to a facility, so that when you come to the facility, you're ready to get the treatment. You're not, going back and forth. So that's an example. Another example would be that you have a certain fall, you have a child and he falls and he starts bleeding, and you're panicking. And what do? It's 8 o'clock in the evening. What do? You run to an ER, because and as a parent, your child bleeding, you certainly start behaving differently. So having a chat with a doctor at that moment will tell you, listen, it's okay. This is not a big problem. Use ice, use this, and then tomorrow morning, you'll be okay. You can come tomorrow morning. Or no, it is a serious issue. Go to ER today. So I think having an advice from a doctor at that moment is very helpful. So that's why we have launched e-dentist platform at Clove, where patients can call in and at least get their initial queries answered. Of course, we're not gonna be able to do your root canal on the phone, at least not today, maybe in the future, but certainly we can do that. So Now, in terms of other industries, I think another industry that is fascinating is the online learning or the education industry. And as you can all see, that many children, many adults are no longer able to go to the format of a school, which you had 20 kids or 30 kids in a small room sitting, 6 foot apart from each other, learning and playing and talking and touching and laughing and, breathing onto each other. That environment doesn't work today, and we don't know, how long will it work and what will happen, even if the vaccines are available, how effective will they be? How long will that result of the vaccine last? So it's going to take a while for us to be able to go back to the old normal. So therefore, online learning is something that will, yes, there is certain amount of learning that must occur by interaction, by, kids arguing, playing, fighting, throwing balls at each other, breaking each other's pencils, learning to resolve conflicts. Yes, those things need to occur in physical presence, but there's a lot of knowledge that can be transferred on an online format. So how will the schools, colleges evolve, and how online learning will evolve into it, and I think that industry is going to evolve significantly. And I think I can go on. There are many industries, all industries, in fact, today where we're sitting on a Zoom call, perhaps pre-COVID, you would probably come into my office, or I'll walk into some, a hotel lobby, and we would have a face-to-face video recording, whereas now we're doing it on Zoom. So I think there's a lot of change, and good news is that technology, and for us healthcare workers, we've had a lot of tools before, but we have not been able to, get the acceptance from the patients, consumers, or the professionals. But now we are getting a lot of acceptance from everyone. So I think we will see a lot of good change, and it will, at the end of the day, I'm an optimist. At the end of the day, once we come out of this crisis, certainly Clove Dental will come out as a stronger and a better company, leaner, meaner, and better company. And I'm pretty sure most companies most organizations who are handling things and have a learning mindset, have a process thinking, who are balancing their ego with their humility, will come out ahead.
Amazing. And you just eased my job out there by summing everything up so aptly. And it's been amazing talking to you, and the conversation has been super insightful for me. And I hope a lot of people can take a lot of things from this.